one of the most, I don't know how to phrase it, but one of the most special things that happens for the actors and the audience is that in this coming together is that for a brief moment, we are able to create a joyous kind of feeling, you know, within. We can get away from the whatever our daily chores are that we all have to, you know, engage in. But for this time, we can escape into this world. And the fact that 40 years later, that the show Dark Shadows is still able to reach out there and grab a little bit of your heart and take you away into that world, so that all other, you know, whatever day-to-day things of life, they're sort of put aside for this world. And for that brief, very joyous and joyful moment, I think it's a moment, I know for me, and I believe for the audience alike, it's a moment to be treasured. And it's, in a way, it's not to be taken lightly, because you just don't find that kind of, you know, rapport, that give and take between the audience and that show, and that it's still going on all these years later is just a testament to that. The creative genius behind Dark Shadows was the one and only, how do you say that word? Inimitable, I can't even say it. The creative force, the driving force behind Dark Shadows was Dan Curtis. And somehow Dan was able to, you know, bring forth all of this. And Dan was almost, if not a professional golfer, he was very close to it, because as I recall, he had started one of the very first televised golf shows, if not the first. And that's just because, you know, one of the interesting things about it is when you look at somebody, you pigeonhole them, or you say, oh, he's a golfer. You know, how could he ever have come up with this other kind of, you know, whether it's a dream he had or a nightmare or just his sheer imagination. So I would imagine when he first came up with the idea, it was a pretty hard sell, because after all, he was pigeonholed as this or that. But what he was able to do was a quite wonderful thing, and dreaming up, you know, this show. And then of course his borrowing, say, other classic stories such as Turn of the Screw, or a lot of maybe some of the hauntedness of Edgar Allan Poe, or a lot of those things, and then combining it with all the costumes, which were handmade. And by the way, and I believe the costume shop, as I recall, yes, it was right there, and they used to hand make all of the clothes, all of the long dresses, for the frock coats that the men wore, and then they had all of these antiques, you know, so for the set pieces. So right away, the first day when I stepped on the stage, and one of the first things I saw was this old, as Quentin, it was this old, I don't know, it was an RCA Victrola, you know, with the dog and the big red megaphone. all of those kinds of pieces, the clothes, the costumes, the stories, and then the writers would sort of do riffs off of all of these famous stories, or Dan would come up with another one of his, oh, let's go here, or let's go back in time. And that may have been one of the greatest things, the fact that we could travel, you know. And it all emanated out of Dan. And that's where Dan first, obviously, where he first started directing. I think that Dark Shadows is certainly a legacy, and it's his legacy that one should be, rightfully so proud of. The fact that all these years later, it is still bringing joy. It is still bringing joy to children, to adults, to teenagers, all these years later. When the show was about over, actually I was in the hospital because I'd had an attack of appendicitis. So the show actually went on for a couple of weeks, and I didn't film those last couple of weeks, but then we were in the process of taking the show and doing another movie, another Dark Shadows movie with Johnny and Grayson and Nancy and Kate and Jimmy Storm. I think it was obviously financial decision. It was a bottom line decision on behalf of ABC at that time, probably. I have no doubt about the fact that they could probably do 5 or 6 game shows for what it may have cost Dark Shadows. Also, it may be that show burned so intensely and so brightly for those years that it was meant, you know, to just go away, to just, you know, go away. And perhaps the reason it stayed in the people's consciousness for all these years is because it burned so brightly and intensely, that it's, you know, so that each one of those shows, you'll meet these, they can quote it to you, they can feed it back to you, because they've seen a lot of the, you know, the episodes so many times. They know, fans know far more than certainly I do, or that I recall. Hello, I'm David Selby, and I've put together a special book called In and Out of the Shadows, containing over 300 color and black and white photographs from my career, with an extensive section devoted to my days as Quentin Collins on Dark Shadows. I've also included some poems I've written that reflect on my life as an actor that I hope you will enjoy. To order In and Out of the Shadows, please call or write to the address on your screen or visit davidselby.com. And thank you for watching Dark Shadows.